from this guy, Johan, up in Chopper 5. Early this morning at first light, you were able to really, put a fine point on what we saw last night as we rolled up there on the scene.
That just from the spinoff of
Correct.
This monster storm. We now take you to a picture, I believe a live picture, the south end of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, of course, spanning Tampa Bay, famous bridge. So many of you, Shannon, you mentioned it's so tall that some of you, and my wife included, she closes her eyes for the whole ride across.
On a good day.
Doesn't love the heights, but has been closed since yesterday because of, obviously, with the storm coming in, and the bridge stands so tall. And you just saw the mad, furious action, the white caps on the waters there. They stay still shut down. Not sure when it will reopen again, a main traffic artery there. Just part of life that has come to a standstill. Tampa Bay, of course, 2 days ago thought that they were going to be right at the heart of Hurricane Ian, that community of some 3.2 million people, I believe, of course, one of the state's largest metro areas, spared the very worst of this storm, where so many there thought that it would be the first time in 100 years, I think since 1921, that Tampa had been hit by a major storm. They thought that their good fortune had run out. But their fortune of being spared the worst of Ian is others' horrible misfortune to the south of them this night and for many, many months to come as you look on at the Sunshine Skyway Bridge.
Hillsborough County did do made quick work of, making those evacuation orders or getting them in place. They had a zone A and then a B, 90,000 more people evacuating yesterday morning. And so they did do quite a remarkable job of getting people out of Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, and getting them on the road and out of that area.
And I want to be careful. Damage assessments, of course, now at nightfall will really start coming into tomorrow. It's not to say there's not damage. Storm surge tends to always be a problem there. They were thinking 3 to 5 feet. 2 days ago, they were thinking that it would be catastrophic storm surge in the Tampa Bay area.
Right.
We'll get a fuller assessment, but they were spared the worst of Ian and are thankful for that. You look at a photo here that reminds me of Hurricane Andrew, and a good friend of mine at what was then Metro Zoo, now Miami Zoo, Ron McGill, world famous photographer, where they brought a lot of the animals in. The flamingos here, you're seeing where? Sunken Gardens in St. Pete?
Sunken Gardens in St. Pete. Wow.
Brought them into the bathroom.
Right. Yeah, and bring them in and protect them from the storm. We gotta protect our furry friends too, right?
And they brought them in,
a safe space.
and they're all hovered together. Moral support for the flamingos at Sunken Gardens in St. Pete. So many people in so many ways, in so many areas, trying to protect human life, trying to protect animal life, trying to protect property, and just the huge task ahead. And that's just one of the many images we'll be seeing.
The disruption to life in the state of Florida.
In every way.
Unspeakable.
In every way.
We'll take a quick break. Back in a moment.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome. I'm just here to keep you guys up to date. I'll be on as long as the power doesn't kick out. We have a lot of wind and rain here, but we're good. We're okay. So we're just going to pray for those that are in the path of the storm. I am east of the storm, so I'm just getting a lot of wind and rain.
Tracking Hurricane Ian, devastation on the Gulf Coast, the southwest coast of Florida, and a hurricane warning in effect still in Okeechobee County.
So affecting part of our viewing area. Okeechobee County is part of that. Our Michael Bushner has been in the Okeechobee County area all day long today. He, I believe he's joining us live. Again, we're trying to reconnect with him. Had a bit of technical difficulty earlier. Michael, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. You can thank the wind, of course, for some of those technical issues. We're taking cover here in a drive-through, if you will, but we're going to kind of step outside just to give you a little bit of a vantage point. About in the last half an hour, 45 minutes or so, things have really, really ramped up here. Let me show you. We're going to pan up to a tree. We have a light with us here. You can see the gusts just come blowing through here. These are very large palm trees, and we get these bursts of very, very, very strong winds where it just pushes these trees, as you could imagine. You could hear that deep howling sounds that you hear during a hurricane. Some debris that's just blowing through the streets, as you could imagine. Most people heeding the warnings to stay away, stay home, if you will, to protect themselves. There is a mandatory curfew in place here, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. here. Sheriff telling us this is to protect people, to protect businesses, and to protect homes. So right now, a little bit of a lull, but then all of a sudden, you do get a very strong burst. Oh, there you go. You could see in the background there what appear to be maybe transformers exploding. The sky lights up in a purple color, then lights up in a red color. So we've been seeing some of those. A lot of limbs and branches moving through the streets as these winds just whip through this area. But you can really get a feel of the impact as we get these very, very strong gusts of wind that move through here. They come out of nowhere, and they could last anywhere from 15 to 20 seconds, and then it kind of quiets down. But that's the story here in Okeechobee. One thing that stands out to me, I could tell you that we've been here since about 10, 11 this morning. It's been relatively dry here. Of course, you'll have some passing rain showers, but for the most part, it's just been very dry. It's this wind that's picked up here in the last maybe 45 minutes or hour or so that is going to, I'd imagine, wreak havoc. You got to wonder about some of the people who made some decisions to stay in their homes. We spoke with some of these people today, some people who live right off of Lake Okeechobee. Some of these people saying that they're not afraid and they're going to risk this. You got to kind of wonder at this hour as the winds begin to pick up here and as Hurricane Ian gets closer to this area, you know, if these people are safe. But a mandatory curfew in place here in Okeechobee County that'll begin at 11 tonight through 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. We're going to go back and take some shelter here, and we'll bring you pictures as soon as the situation changes. We'll send it right back to you.
There for us in Okeechobee County. You know, the curfew is in effect from 11 o'clock tonight until 5 in the morning, and the sheriff's office putting out this notification, anticipating, Steve, what you have said all along, and these winds are going to be kicking up even more starting after the 9 o'clock hour.
Yeah, it looks like between 9 and maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I've put together some graphics to show you kind of the peak winds for the next few hours with this storm system. If we can go to max 2, I'll show you the latest on the storm with the hurricane moving inland and expected to track to the north of Okeechobee and Lake Okeechobee overnight. Max 2, please. And then eventually off the coastline as we get into tomorrow, or likely around the noon hour. There's a look at the storm, a whole different situation from what it was when it made landfall at 3 o'clock this afternoon with winds at 150 miles an hour. But there is a extreme wind warning, a bulletin or a warning from the National Weather Service because of this area here that has continued to hold strong winds briefly over 100 miles an hour possible in this area through Sebring and back down through Arcadia. It does not include Okeechobee County, but it is fairly close. And we're going to keep an eye on that. There's the warned area right there showing up in pink. Extreme wind warning. We saw one earlier for the west coast, southwest coast of Florida as the storm made landfall. They're extremely rare. Rarely will you see this warning used. This is a warning that's used to tell people to get in a safe room and stay there until the strongest winds start to roll away. And these are winds that can cause structural damage. We also have the tornado watch for the Treasure Coast. It's been discontinued, though, for Palm Beach County. And here are the current wind speeds. So we've been up over 60 miles an hour for gusts in Okeechobee. They're down to 56, a little bit less, 67 in Sebring now. a little bit higher. And these winds in Sebring should be higher than Okeechobee for the next couple of hours, as the storm track is expected to be closer to Okeechobee than I should say, closer to Sebring than Okeechobee overnight and early tomorrow. All right, here's this is the European model. All the models have generally the same forecast winds. These are wind gusts. Okeechobee looking at about 66, so we're very close to that right now. But look what happens as we get in toward, well, that would be 8 p.m. The winds continue to climb 78 as we head in toward midnight. When that's hurricane force wind gusts, and then they start to drop into 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. and then we get down into some more reasonable winds across not only Palm Beach County but or Okeechobee too. So we could get into the mid 70s for wind gusts. Sustained winds may briefly reach hurricane strength, but won't last very long if they do. And that forecast track taking it north the next couple of days, and then eventually off in toward Charleston. That'll be on Friday and Saturday of next week. So that hurricane warning still in effect for Okeechobee County, and we have a tropical storm warning that is in effect for the Treasure Coast and Palm Beach County. That'll be in effect overnight. The storm really has to start to pull away before any of this is dropped. So this is staying home. In fact, in the 11 p.m. advisory, well, the local weather office does the inland hurricane warning, so that'll be in place likely through 11 at midnight along the coastline. Tropical storm warning, probably it maybe get dropped down around Miami, but likely stay in place across Treasure Coast and Palm Beach County because the winds are expected to continue to strengthen a little bit and also stay up right through sunrise and through at least part of tomorrow. Busy.
Yeah, Steve, Ian is making its presence known internationally. I mean, Puerto Rico, Cuba gave the Keys quite a scare, the entire state of Florida, and then it's going to make another landfall in the Carolinas. So Ian is going to be one for the record books for sure. And you can see it's still a massive circulation. But as Steve pointed out, when we look at a really strong, healthy hurricane, the deep convection kind of encircles the eye wall. And now you can see all this dry air moving in from the south. Good for us. So that's why we have enjoyed relatively dry conditions over the past few hours here at home. All right, let's go ahead and show you now as Ian moves to our north, what we can expect here at home, local impacts. Current winds right now generally between 24 up to 36 miles per hour in Okeechobee. So we're going to start with Okeechobee County because they are likely to see the highest winds, and they are the county under a hurricane warning for tonight. So we want everyone to be careful, stay inside. As we mentioned, they are under a curfew. So winds 50 to 75 miles per hour, higher in squalls or rainfall 3 to 6, but locally higher. So Okeechobee County, please be careful tonight. Indian River County, you're still under a tropical storm warning, flood watch and a tornado watch, winds 40 to 65. We head down the coast to St. Lucie County, 45 to 55 mile per hour winds, still under that tornado watch. Martin County, wind speeds a little less because Martin County a little further south from the storm. So winds 40 to 50 miles per hour, of course, higher in wind squalls. And Palm Beach County, we are out of the tornado watch. So that is good news. Not that we couldn't see an isolated spin up, but it's becoming less and less likely as we are now in the southeastern quadrant of the storm. So winds will start to weaken for Palm Beach County by Thursday morning. Again, here's another look at our local radar. Just some light showers, mainly western areas, and some mainly light rain across Okeechobee County. The one exception would be the extreme northwestern corner that could still see some heavy rain. So we'll see rain over the next 24 to 36 hours. But again, the threat is diminishing further south to further north. So Indian River County, Okeechobee County, you'll be the last to really get out of the circulation of Ian. I want to leave you with where the tornado watch is still in effect, Okeechobee County and portions of the Treasure Coast. For now, let's send it back to Michael and Shannon.
All right, Kate, thanks. And we don't want to take our eyes off the West Coast for sure tonight. The storm isn't done there yet. You can see live pictures coming into us this evening from Punta Gorda on the West Coast.
And as we look at that body of water back there, you can't tell if it's a canal, interlaced with canals there. I just reminded Shannon, we all know what it's like. Certainly, we know a lot of you relatively new to our community. We also know many of you here, Charlie, Francis, and of course, Francis and Jean. Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Jean, Wilma. Francis and Jean, then Wilma, 5, Francis, Jean, and Wilma directly impacted this community. And I just think tonight, by the numbers, the governor said conservatively, more than 1 million customers without power on Southwest Florida's coast. That's conservatively. 42,000 people poised to move into this state to start trying restoration efforts. Storm surge that went miles and miles inland, 10 feet of storm surge in some cases. And so you can quantify it by the numbers what's ahead, but the emotional toll is something you simply can never quantify for people who a week ago were enjoying their lives, many of them retirees in Southwest Florida, and now your life completely turned upside down. And so many in our community know exactly what that's like. So many of you came here from South Miami-Dade after Hurricane Andrew, and we will see that kind of thing again. And it's heart-wrenching, but we are reminded that we'll come together as a state, just as we did for every other community. But tough night, and our hearts all go out to the people across the state, particularly in Southwest Florida at this hour.
So well said, Michael. And for perspective, you go back to Tori Dunnan's interview of some of the evacuees who are settling in along that mobile home park along the north edge of Lake Okeechobee, and saying tonight, while she left her home behind, you know, and was really grieving the loss of her home because she knew that they had taken a really big hit tonight, that she had her animals and she had her family with her and her life. And that was important to her.
Continuing coverage on a story that will be with us for a long time to come. We're keeping an eye out. The hurricane warning in Okeechobee County. Continuing coverage right here. We'll be back in just a moment.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome. Appreciate you all. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, yes, I'm on the east side of the storm, so it's not as rough as it is on the west side. You know, the west side, they're getting the rough part. I mean, we're getting the wind and rain, because anytime you're on the right side of the storm, that's when you get all the wind, the rain, the tornado warnings. I could not sleep a wink last night because every time the alarm kept going off, tornado in your area, take shelter now. I mean, literally every hour. The moment you shut your eyes, the warning came on. So it was like team no sleep last night. If you got sleep last night, you were lucky, because I mean, the notifications was bananas. But you know, God is good. We just have to pray for those that are in the direct path of the storm. I mean, although majority of all of Florida is in there, but those that are in the direct path, we have to pray for them. Like, it's in Fort Myers area now, and it will be heading to the Tampa area. So we just have to pray for those that are in the path of the storm. Bless up yourself, Sister Lorna Harvey, my mom, Evangelist Marina Thomas, Sister Faith Connection. Who else? Prophet Kevin Britt, Sister Arlene, made by Trini Lena, Great A's, Minister O'Neill Givens, bless up yourself. Aldrin Escano, bless up yourself. My big sis Keisha King, bless up yourself. Sissy Fate Connection, Princess Alma, EK, Kia Media. Who else? Trying to get everybody before this thing comes back on. Madario, July 2nd, Miss Judy, Kenya.
If you rewind just 3 days ago, so many people in Pinellas County, St. Pete Beach, Clearwater, they were packing up. And to your point, just a couple of moments ago before we hit break, I mean, they were in a mode of get out now, packing up everything they owned and certainly heading out. And were they spared? We're checking in on St. Pete Beach tonight.
But certainly, while storm surge can be an issue there, and they were talking 3 to 5 feet in the Tampa St. Pete area. And we'll check on damage assessments there, of course, but nothing like the direct hit they thought they were going to take. And we all have friends all over the state. I know many of you at home have friends in every city, and big and small here. And so, relatively speaking, breathing at least a sigh of relief compared to what they thought they might get as the storm ended up having its main impact south of them.
That's right. Yeah. Julie Salamone is checking things out on St. Pete. She was there, St. Pete Beach. She was there just a short time ago.
We are here in St. Pete, not far from the marina, and take a look at some of the sights that we're seeing. You can see that the top of this tree, this palm tree, snapped off. We're also seeing the top of some street lights also snap off. There's debris in the roadways, things like that. The city of St. Pete said that this area is in an evacuation zone, zones A, B, C, and also mobile homes were evacuated under a mandatory evacuation starting earlier this week. So they're encouraging everyone to stay off of the roads. Also, they're encouraging people to reduce their water use. They're saying now is not the time to use water. So don't use the dishwasher, don't use the washing machine, limit your water use. Again, we also did see some people driving around and walking around, but they're really urging people to stay inside. That is the latest in St. Petersburg. Julie Salomon, ABC Action News.
The sun comes up tomorrow, we will see exactly what that area really has endured in terms of a storm surge. But those images that we just got out of Julie looked pretty good, Steve Weigel. Not as bad as we were anticipating, again, 3 days ago.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, and with the change in the storm track, that helps some areas and other areas not so much. So, of course, that is a situation that just with the adjusting tracks the last couple of days. Let's go to Max 2, and I'll show you the latest the storm track for this. And the storm continues to move inland and weaken at the same time, and eventually off the east coast around the Space Coast, or a little farther north around Daytona. That'll happen around midday on Thursday. We're starting to see some bands of rain working across Palm Beach County and the Treasure Coast, kind of these inner spokes working through, but the hurricane's lost a lot of its energy. There's still some very strong, potentially damaging winds on the northern side of what is left to that eye. The eye is almost completely gone. It really, at this point, not even an eye. It's a center of circulation that's moving over Lake Placid, but strong winds, upwards of 80, 90 mile an hour wind gusts, maybe even higher in this area. And we're seeing some strong wind gusts even develop across the Okeechobee County area. Extreme wind warning in effect. That is not for our viewing area, but just outside of Okeechobee County for the next couple of hours. Tornado watch continues, and we have a special weather statement in white here showing that there's still the potential for strong damaging winds across Okeechobee. Now, we've lost our weather sensor at the Okeechobee Airport. Hopefully that's just temporary. But the winds have gone up in Sebring to 75. Those are wind gusts, not sustained winds. And we have a mix of 40 and 50 miles an hour on the Treasure Coast and a little bit less in Palm Beach County. That's unfortunate. Hopefully we can get some data back on the Okeechobee side to get the actual wind speeds for the next few hours. So here's the one of the models, European model, indicating that the winds will go up to mid-high 70s for gusts into midnight and then start to drop as we head into 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and even more as we get in toward Thursday afternoon. And a similar situation for Palm Beach County with gusty wind, not as strong as those winds, but anywhere from 30 to 50 miles an hour, and then continuing to drop into Thursday, especially in the late morning and early afternoon. A big improvement.
So we're moving on to some storm damage from last night now. And before you go, I know that typically, after storms like this, and we try to unpack storm damage, determine whether there was a tornado or not. Can you say for sure, or have you gotten word, official words, or any indication today that what we experienced last night was, in fact, right? We had reports of tornadoes on the ground from the National Weather Service, didn't we? And how does that confirmation go? And in a situation like this, is it different than any other given day?
Well, it is a confirmed tornado, the one that hit Delray and the Kings Point area. That is a confirmed tornado because we had people on the ground who saw the tornado. We have numerous videos. So the Weather Service has determined that is a confirmed tornado. There were damage in 2 other spots, I believe Wellington and the Jupiter area. Those are not confirmed at this point. I'm not sure if they're going to do additional, what they do is they wait a few days and see additional videos and photos that come in and some reports, observations from people, and they may make a determination at that point. Likely they were tornadoes because we had 20 tornado warnings last night. Many of those were in Palm Beach County, and there was certainly solid circulation on the radar. So that whether they confirm that those were tornadoes or not, they did a lot of damage.
Is real.
In fact, there's an updated report from Associated Press talking about this Category 4 storm with winds near 150 miles an hour. A power outage website that is used to kind of gauge this says more than 1.8 million, so nearly 2 million Florida homes and businesses are without electricity. And according to this AP report, think about that, nearly every home and business in 3 counties up and down Southwest Florida are in the dark tonight. That's why when FPL and others talk about this mammoth effort to restore infrastructure, it's going to be so huge. At one point, they'd ordered 2.5 million Floridians. There's about 21 coming up on 22 million people in the state. So think about that. A little bit more than 1 out of 10 Floridians were asked to evacuate in the face of this massive storm. Couldn't be required to by law. Don't know. We know many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, did so. Many others chose not to. Those who did not are living in the dark tonight. We hope as safely as they can. Many who fled, including to our community, don't know when they can go back. They're effectively, temporarily homeless.
So as the light of day comes up tomorrow, we'll start being able to assess the damage, helping people who may be still stranded. Tonight, we've had some indication and reports of that. But meanwhile, we begin on our coastline, picking up the pieces from that damage we saw last night.
All right, and Shannon, you were right in the middle of it. You and several of our other crews. Even the indirect impacts, the spinoffs of storms or confirmed tornadoes, also showing the power of the storm. And Brianna Nesbral was part of that coverage. West Palm Beach, or down in the Delray area, to be more specific, the Delray area where Kings Point, where people from Kings Point, from Delray were taken and brought back up to West Palm Beach. The community already helping out. About 3 dozen people from Kings Point and Delray had to be moved out. West Palm opening its arms, as our community always does. And Brianna Nesbral looks at that for us at this hour.
We've seen those heart-wrenching images coming from Kings Point and Delray Beach overnight. Well, this senior living facility is taking in some of those evacuees, coming in with just a handful of their belongings and their blankets after their homes were demolished. An aerial view from Chopper 5 this morning shows the extent of the damage from Kings Point and Delray Beach, with roofs torn off buildings and cars overturned.
There was just debris everywhere. Cars were overturned. Even my car got a slight damage to it.
David Jones was one of those Kings Point residents sitting through what the National Weather Service has verified to be a tornado ripping through his condominium.
I heard a big crack, and that was it. They determined the building is uninhabitable, and I had to vacate. And now they won't let me back in.
In an act of charity, Fountain View in West Palm Beach is taking in some of those displaced Kings Point residents. They tell me it's part of their normal hurricane prep to prepare to accept evacuees.
We serve the elderly and the vulnerable population. So it's imperative that we step up to help these folks that otherwise wouldn't have access.
And those evacuees brought here will now be given a roof over their head, food, and transportation for up to 60 days as they wait to see when they'll be able to return home.
What else are you going to do? I'm alive, she's alive, and my dog's alive. So
in West Palm Beach, I'm Brianna Nesbral, WPTV News Channel 5.
There's that perspective, Michael, we've been talking about for the past couple of days here. And this while we dip in on some video coming in from Sanibel Island from earlier today, clearly as it was daylight. But you kind of see this time lapse and look at how that wind just, and the storm surge, that water just surging in so quickly. At one point today, Michael, I remember Steve saying that there was a 12-foot storm surge on Sanibel. And you're seeing this time-lapse video showing in detail, in short order here, how that transpired.
And I believe this time-lapse video was all within an hour.
Wow.
So much of that island overwashed. Of course, Sanibel and Captiva, barrier islands there, and the power of this storm just sending surge, literally covering those islands. 2 of the many places where emergency crews at some point will be getting out there to try to begin their assessment. But my goodness, Shannon, as you look at that and you realize the power, awesome and scary power of nature, all right that there, in about an hour.
In 1 hour. It really does tell the story. And so many reports have come in that a number of people did remain back on Sanibel and Captiva, also Pine Island. We're certainly hoping for a good news tomorrow as officials try to make their way to those barrier islands.
Should say we've not had any direct casualty reports on the southwest coast, and
that is good news.
That's good news
so far.
So far, a lot of assessments to come. We will continue to hope that remains the same, and we'll just leave it at that. We don't have any official reports, and we'll have to wait for all of that. But again, back on our side of the coast, we had our own headaches, nothing remotely like that. But again, if you were in Kings Point, if you were in other places, flooded roads, tornado touchdowns, it is.
All right. So again, thank you everyone who was here thus far. I'm just trying to keep everybody updated to what's happening in the area. And I'm going to go ahead and slide on over to like the other side of town so we can see what's going on. I'm just trying to get all over the place so that we can get a perspective on what is actually happening in and around Florida with this storm here. So again, thank you guys. I'm doing my best to keep you guys updated for an hour or two. So let me go ahead and keep the news going. God bless you all and welcome.
O'clock there in Florida as Hurricane Ian is moving its way inland. It's now at a Category 3 level strength, but it is really moving so slowly. One could argue that it's kind of hovering over central Florida with so much rain and still very, very strong winds. We're going to take a very quick commercial break. When we come back, though, we'll be talking to a former FEMA official about what the recovery and cleanup process is going to look like. I know many of you probably are saying, wait, it's too early to start talking about that, but it's not too early. We'll have that conversation in just 2 minutes. Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. This is our Weather XRAD system here at Live Now. As you can see, what is left of Hurricane Ian, and there's a lot of it. It's now at a Category 3 strength. I'm Andrew Kraft. We want to thank you for being with us, for choosing Live Now. Right now, let's bring in, though, former FEMA official Mark Naveau, and we've spoken to Mark so many times in so many different instances like this. Mark, thanks so much for being with us. My question to you, though, and we were talking offline, is the storm is nowhere close to being over. My question, though, is the worst past, though, in your view?
No, it's not, Andrew. How are you? Over the next 2 or 3 hours, you're going to continue to see tremendous damage. I call it the trifecta of tragedy. And hurricanes are measured by, storm surge, rainfall, and wind. And we've had all three of those at the utmost in bands. And what we're getting now is tremendous water and rainfall mixing with the storm surge. So it's just going to continue to compound for probably the next 4 or 5 hours and then move to other parts of the state.
Mark, we know upwards of 1.5 million people are without power. And, this also might be too early to tell as well. But we have seen similar types of storms like this where people are out of power for days on end. Is that what you're envisioning? How quickly can they restore power in a scenario like this where the storm is still working its way through?
Well, this is a noticed event, unlike a non-noticed event, might be a wildfire or something of that nature. There was enough time to do some planning. So the state of Florida and the federal government did a wonderful job bringing mutual aid, electrical linemen, and technicians staged from all over the country to be ready to go into these areas. But a couple of things come to mind, and we've already heard Florida Power and Light talk about that they're going to have to rebuild some of this system. It's not just going in and rehanging electrical wire. They're going to have to rebuild. So that means that recovery on the electrical grid is going to take longer. And from an emergency management standpoint, power is one of the top priorities, if not the top priority.
You know, Mark, just talking once again about, power restoration, we were also speaking and listening in to some of the folks at Fox 13 in Tampa and Fox 35 in Orlando. They were speaking with people saying you have to let the water recede, but after that, the ground could still be so saturated, and that could be, problematic when you want to restore power quickly. So you have to wait for at least the ground to dry a little bit more. Help us flesh that out.
Yeah, what we've heard, which was interesting from Senator Scott from Florida, talking about that Florida is already saturated because of previous weather. And so you get saturation plus more seawater and fresh water coming into the ground. And it creates problems for the power poles, the trees that knock down the power poles and the lines. But here's the other part of this, and this is kind of the silent component to the grid that we don't talk a lot about. We can get power restored fairly quickly in a lot of cases, but the challenge comes in when the storm surge rolls in, storm surge just being a large wall of water, in this case up to 20 feet. Well, that water is at ground level and seeping down into all the infrastructure. So the salt water is damaging the inside of many of these homes and businesses. So once you get power up, you also have to make sure that the buildings are safe to energize.
Yeah. Mark, help us figure this out. When FEMA comes in, is it directly in the immediate aftermath of when the storm dissipates, or are they helping with possible, recovery operations, rescue operations, when the floodwaters are still there, when the rain is still falling? What's their role in that? Because you and I were talking offline, and you have been hearing about, not everyone heeded these evacuation orders, and there are going to be people who are stranded.
Yeah, no question. Good thought, Andrew. And FEMA has been involved with the state of Florida and local officials and non-governmental organizations for probably a week and a half planning. They've got resources staged all over. For instance, they've got, swift water rescue task force teams in Miami and Tennessee and Georgia ready to roll in wherever necessary. You got the National Guard involved. FEMA's got a number of warehouses that house life-sustaining commodities, water, cots, infant supplies, all of that's ready to go. So they've done a wonderful job mobilizing and getting ready, up and to including coordinating now the Florida State Emergency Operations Center in Tallahassee. So the idea is that they're planning through this, get resources in place. They're combined together, working under the, an incident command system. And so they've been working for quite some time. Now, when the water starts to recede or winds get down below 45 miles an hour, you're going to see first responders, law enforcement officers, National Guard folks going in and trying to rescue those who actually stayed or bring supplies to them by air or water.
Mark, one of the common themes and refrains in the last, 72 hours has been that Florida knows what they're doing, and they're as well equipped as any state would be because they have suffered through so many of these storms. So that is kind of a positive light in this because they do know what they're doing. But you and I have spoken about some of these, historical precedents. What jumps out to you as far as named storms in the past that you're seeing some similarities with? We're already learning that this Ian is record-breaking. According to our folks in Tampa, they say it is the fourth strongest storm to ever hit Florida. But let's go back. Are you seeing some similarities with other named storms that left a punch like this?
You are, and what you're hearing Floridians talk about is Charlie, which was probably the major hurricane for them. And to your point, they've had a number of them. But this one is different because it has all three facets that we talked about earlier. This is going to have an economic toll a life toll, recreation. This is going to affect everything. And you remember where this strikes land is in the Fort Myers area, but the tropical winds are 80 miles in, diameter outside of that. And so you're going to reach into large population bases like Orlando, Tampa Bay. And if you remember Tampa Bay, that port supplies half of the daily consumption for Floridians in gasoline. So you can't have that port shut down very long without having great impacts.
Yeah, of course. And we heard from Florida Governor DeSantis that one of the main priorities when all of this settles is getting the ports back open. But, it is so difficult, Mark, to, put some type of timetable on this because the storm is literally still happening as we speak. Let's talk more about where FEMA comes in. We've been hearing a lot from the FEMA administrator, Deanna Criswell. She was at the White House press briefing yesterday. We heard from President Biden today about this storm. And we've been hearing from so many Florida officials. How do you think they're doing? Are they as prepared as they needed to be? I know it might be too early to tell, but let's game this out.
You bet. Well, a couple things come. You talked about the administrator, so there's coordination taking place. The governor's talking to the president, so that's good. One of the regional administrators for FEMA in that area that covers a number of the states is a lady by the name of Grace Check, and she's very, very good at what she does. So she's moving resources. They've got some specialized teams. For instance, there are only 3 what they call national incident management teams in the country that deal with the most complex disasters. They've got 2 of them down there in Florida helping manage, but also to handle the recovery part of it. So by all indications, things are going pretty good. But keep in mind, this is a big storm with a lot of challenges. We're going to know a lot more tomorrow when the sun rises.
Yeah, Mark, let's also talk from the, just the everyday Floridian level, because they're going to have to, if they evacuated, they're going to have to come back in a few days and find what's left. And hopefully there is something left, but there's going to be a lot of damage. And you can kind of just write this out already that there's going to be federal dollars going to these affected areas because of how massive this storm has been. So what does that look like? Is the FEMA process when it comes to getting federal dollars to help you get back on your feet, how is that complex? Is that arcane? What do you make of that?
No, it's been the use of technologies come into play. And so usually
You make of that?
No, it's been the use of technologies come into play. And so usually within a matter of days, once they're able to establish field offices, they'll open those up with different agencies and governmental, non-governmental agencies, Red Cross, Salvation Army, different types of folks coming into that. Then people who are affected by the hurricane can either go there or use their computer, assuming they have electricity, to be able to access the FEMA system. And they can provide you, once you provide the necessary documentation, which is fairly easy, you can get money in your bank account pretty quick to help you recover. Now, the caveat to that is that FEMA is not there to rebuild your home. They're really a stopgap measure, and insurance for the most part, or Small Business Administration loans, is the largest provider of funding for when there is not insurance. And unfortunately, hurricanes create the largest loss of life and damage in terms of dollars and cents. And most people do not carry flood insurance. And so that makes this even more trying in terms of what's going to happen in the coming days.
Yeah, Mark, we were Floridians are trying to, rebuild their lives after a storm like this rolls through. Do they work in tandem?
They do, Andrew. And for the most part, flood insurance in the United States of America is underwritten by FEMA. There are private carriers that assist, but for the most part, that's federal taxpayer money working its way through the FEMA system for flood insurance. But about a year ago, they had some changes to that program and it started to increase premiums. And so you saw a drop in the number of people who were participating, and already there was a small number. So what you're going to see here, unfortunately, is a number of people come back to their home and need assistance. And so they'll go to these, disaster recovery centers, and where they'll probably get most of their assistance, truthfully, are low-cost loans provided by the small SBA, Small Business Administration.
Okay, Mark Naveau, just last question for you, because we're not out of this storm just yet. It is very, very early, but let's talk back about the mechanics of Ian itself. What are you going to be looking for in the next 8-10 hours, and then as we go into early Thursday?
Well, what you're going to want to do is they've got a plan A, B, and C going on. And what we've heard from some of the local responders is they're actually on plan D. I mean, it's shifting so much. But what they want to do is keep an eye on the track. Where is that moving as it crosses the
still falls. Appreciate the report, Charles.
And Stephen, we're going to go a little farther north now from Sarasota, actually, to Tallahassee, where we find our very own Mitty Hicks, who is just kind of on the fringes of the outer rain bands. But really, we're watching as really all of the forces are mobilizing, coming together as we are looking at a very long road to recovery in the days ahead. Mitty.
Hey, well, good evening, Kendall. I can tell you that being here in Tallahassee, it's pretty much a waiting game because we are at the Emergency Operations Center, and this is the center for staging all of those key resources that will get to places like Sarasota County, where my colleague Charles Watson is. He just mentioned how it's just going to be a long road to recovery when people wake up tomorrow morning and, they really assess the damage. So what they're doing here is the people, the state, the local and federal leaders are really just watching the situation unfold in the southern region of Florida. We've had a chance to be in this building and just watching the crews. The U.S. Coast Guard is inside. The National Guard is inside, the American Red Cross, FEMA, and it's pretty intense as everyone really watch how Hurricane Ian is just really hitting down again in that southern region. As far as the Governor Ron DeSantis, he's been making his final rounds throughout the state, giving people an update on those rescue and recovery efforts. Take a listen.
There's now over 42,000 linemen and other personnel ready to restore power in 30 different areas across the state. Our Department of Transportation does have 1,200 personnel on standby to perform cut and toss operations, understanding how important it is to get those roadways clear as soon as possible. Supplies will be brought in by plane, boat, and by high water vehicle. Airports in Southwest Florida.
And guys, I can tell you at that the latest news conference at about 5:30 this evening, Governor DeSantis did confirm that at least 26 states have sent in resources, including EMT, fire, and rescue. Currently, there's not a statewide curfew, but there are places like Fort Myers and Naples that are currently under a curfew, Kendall.
And Mitty, a lot of emergency personnel just waiting to get out and help those individuals who are trapped as we continue to watch the system pull further to the north and the east. Mitty Hicks in Tallahassee. Thank you. Stephen.
All right, time to track now the very heavy rain that is still falling through central Florida. We have this flash flood emergency that we've been watching, where about 12 to 19 inches worth of rain has fallen. You can see where it's located. It's that bigger polygon there. It includes a part of Highlands County, Charlotte, Manatee, Sarasota, and Hardee County, also DeSoto County. A lot of these customers, people living in these counties have no power, and the very heavy rain. And you can also see when we're talking about the rain associated with Ian, it's really on the northern and western fringe of this storm, or the northern and western side. Through the center, still it's a little quiet. Now, the center is obviously the eye eroding. We've seen that collapse as it's moved inland, and this storm overall is weakening, but it's not having a big effect on the rain. In fact, based on the dynamics that we have to deal with this evening in Florida, very heavy rain is going to continue, and that could continue to spread farther to the east. But that flash flood emergency that we have, it's because of this, the amount of rain that we have seen fallen. And a lot of this has fallen just within the past 12 hours or so. Keep in mind, we had landfall of Hurricane Ian shortly after 3 o'clock on the East Coast. So we're talking about 6 hours since landfall occurred. All of this rain, and a lot of it happening within the last few hours, you can see just how much. My word, nearly 20 inches radar indicated, a little closer to Northport, up north of Port Charlotte, south of Sarasota. We were just talking to Charles Watson. That's where he's positioned. Very heavy rain continuing, though, to spread farther inland. That's going to remain a big threat. But more than a foot of rain falling in a lot of these locations, that even in the state of Florida is going to lead to flooding. In fact, catastrophic flooding. There were reports too in Venice that homes had started taking on the water. And keep in mind, where we had landfall, it was south of Venice. This was on the side, on the northern side of the hurricane. And when you think about how a hurricane moves, the overall circulation is counterclockwise. So we weren't dealing with that significant storm surge. The water that these homes were taking on in Venice, it's because of the very heavy rain. Now in Naples, what we're looking at there with video, that's the storm surge. That's the surge that moved in as Hurricane Ian made landfall. And we saw that significant storm surge, upwards of 8, 9, even 10 feet worth of storm surge. Significant, and also a catastrophic component of this. Looking at the threat that we have regarding this flash flood threat, while we have that emergency, which runs until 10:45 this evening, all throughout Central Florida into Orlando, all the way into Daytona Beach, this extreme threat for heavy rain. That's because as we head into the overnight hours, we might see some of this rain even get enhanced by its interaction with this stalled boundary that we have just to the north. So with that in mind, this flooding threat's going to continue to, unfortunately, persist. As far as the rain that we're expecting, the rain that could still come, 12 to 18 inches appears to be the highlighted area. Daytona Beach right through that thread, unfortunately. And then farther to the south and west, those rain totals will taper off. But that's, of course, because Hurricane Ian is still moving off to the north and to the east. It's crazy that we're approaching on the East Coast 9:30 and we're still calling this a hurricane after having made landfall about 6 hours ago or so. So that rain that's still to come, that is a big threat, and that's going to continue to be a significant threat. Our Fox model still is we're watching where this could be moving. We need to watch it pretty carefully, emerging into the Gulf, in the Atlantic, and then perhaps making another landfall in South Carolina or Georgia.
It just goes to show, Stephen, how incredibly strong this system is. And we want to bring it now to Fort Myers, because this is where we find Fox Weather's Will Nunley. He has been riding out Hurricane Ian all day long in Fort Myers. And Will, the worst of the storm, the center is located just to the northeast of you, but you are still dealing with the heavy rain and the gusty winds this evening.
And I think the wind is the most prevalent tonight for what we're seeing. And I just cannot help but think about the thousands of people tonight that are trying to figure a way out of the situation that they may be in when we have the tremendous amount of floodwater that has come up around here, the trees that are down, the homes that have been damaged or destroyed, and they have been essentially trapped in this massive circulating storm now for hours on end. We were talking about, I think it was Stephen just mentioning that he's amazed that we're still talking about this being called a hurricane this late at night. We're amazed that we're still seeing these incredible wind gusts this late at night when we have been in this environment since about 10 o'clock this morning, experiencing this wind and rain. The rain has subsided a little bit. We haven't had flood issues where we are. We're about 10 minutes or so removed from downtown Fort Myers. So flooding, at least in our immediate area, has not been an issue. But the wind continues to just rip the tops off of some of these gas stations over here. We've heard things crashing down as some of the infrastructure gives way. The street signs are down, the traffic lights are down. And now you may even see behind me, cars starting to get out and navigate this because it has calmed down somewhat. Again, that rain letting up. So people think it's okay to get out and start exploring. I'm sure everybody has emergencies, honestly, that they need to try to tend to at this moment. But you're going to come across debris in an instant that makes it so dangerous. And then you could create another emergency there, and there's no one to respond. Because one thing we have not seen down any of these roads are fire trucks or police cars. We just saw our first convoy of utility trucks about 5 minutes ago. That has been the only presence of any type of response team in the area. And it's not because they're not ready to get out. It's because it's still too dangerous. The wind is still gusting too much. And now you're entering down these darkened roads that are filled with debris and a whole different type of hazard. Meanwhile, you have people that are trying to get out and reach family and friends tonight with cell phones that aren't working because so many of the cell towers have been damaged. So guys, we have a very critical 12 hours ahead of us. I'm afraid that we're going to see some absolutely terrible scenes tomorrow when we get our Fox flight team in the air and start to really drone over some of these locations and bring you this coverage because we continue, even as we speak, to get torn apart by this wind tonight.
And Will, I'm honestly shocked to hear that you saw those power crews, that convoy heading out, because we're still very much dealing with those hurricane force wind gusts in and around the Fort Myers area. But that's just goes to show how hardworking these emergency personnel and these power crews individuals are trying to do to help restore that power for so many. Will Nunley, thank you so much for that report.
All right, we are still watching and, of course, looking at the different threats that we have associated with Hurricane Ian. We do want to bring in the director of the Osceola County OEM, Bill Litton. Bill, good evening to you. Update us on the situation there, what you guys have been dealing with in Osceola County.
Well, good evening. We've been working through this since about 7 o'clock this morning. We activated to level 1 status. We're on 24-hour watch now. Our biggest concern right now is going to be the rains for our area. We're looking at about 10 to 15 inches of rain within the next 12-hour period. The wind speeds are looking a little bit better, but we're still going to have gusts over 100 miles per hour in some of our areas in the northwest part of our county, and then sustained winds for that 12-hour period as well. So concerns there. And then we're in actually a tornado warning currently, or tornado watch currently right now until 1 a.m.
And I think with the threats that we've had, especially with some of these outer rain bands, that tornado threat is really going to ramp up. Regarding the amount of rain that could fall there in Osceola County, what would that do to some of the more populated cities?
We've been watching that. We've got 3 concerning areas in our area: the Shingle Creek Basin, Point Siena, Florida, and then BBL. For our urban area, a couple of those are in our urban area, but the Shingle Creek's going to be at a probably historical mark right now, 62. That was last seen back in Hurricane Irma. So there's concerns there for that area. So definitely concerning for historical flooding event for us.
There's been a lot of talk too of Hurricane Irma, given the overall path that we've seen of Ian, but especially when we're even this late in the evening. I mean, we're approaching 9:30 tonight, and we're still dealing with a hurricane that's going to bring that extreme flooding threat. And for perspective, Osceola is just south of Orlando. As far as those winds are concerned, as you mentioned, Bill, that would knock out power. How has power been so far this evening there?
Yeah, it's gone on a downward track right now. We're currently about 13.
St. Lucie County, forgive me, helping deputies who came on, again, our frontline responders, police, fire, paramedics, the power crews that will be getting cheers around the state for months to come. But in this case, residents said, let's help deputies. So they all got together, removing a tree from South Indian River Drive. It's one small example of the big hearts in our community as people said, let's all chip in, let's all help. That's south of Midway Road. The road's back open. The deputies with people there said, we're going to get together. You're going to have to see that. And I'm sure we will see it in many ways, big and small, in the months to come. across this state as we all work together to restore.
Such an important artery there for that community. So, you know, the residents came together and said, let's get this done. Let's work with law enforcement and get this done quickly for the, you know, benefit of the entire community. Our Todd Wilson, meanwhile, live for us right now, moving on this evening to Vero Beach in the downtown area there. Todd, what can you tell us about the situation, the conditions there tonight?
It's been an interesting day, to be very honest with you. We've been all over Indian River County and all over Vero Beach. And like you said, we're right here in downtown. I would say in the last maybe 4 to 5 hours, it hasn't rained. And if it has, it was more of a quick little rain, nothing too hard, nothing too long, and then it would go away. But earlier, that wasn't the case. Remember now, there was a lot of rain here. There was some flooding. But I would say without the water, the rain coming down to replenish that, I would think that most of that flooding has probably gone. But what we're dealing with down here in Vero Beach is what you hear right now. That is the wind. And we've had some strong wind gusts here. Nothing that is breaking windows downtown or damaging anything, but it's been strong and it's been creating a lot of debris all over the place. Let me show you exactly. We got some debris here. This is what you see everywhere around Vero Beach. I mean, it's very common to see a truck or a car that has one of these under there, and all you hear is it's sweeping the ground. Now, we understand that the county is under a tornado watch. We understand it's under a tropical storm warning, but we also know there's a flood watch. So the county has really prepared for the worst, which is a smart thing. So they're at a level right now where they're in constant contact with law enforcement, fire rescue, but also FP&L, just like Jay was saying. You know, there's some folks that were in this area that went out with power, so went out without power. So, but the county has also opened up 3 shelters. Now, those shelters are actually dealing with folks that have special needs. They also dealing with folks that have pets and also families. So I want to give people a number that you can call for here in Indian River County. It is 772-226-4000. That's for anybody that has any information that they need to know about this storm and what the county is doing. Live in Vero Beach, Todd Wilson, WPTV, News Channel 5.
Todd, thank you very much. Meanwhile, Michelle Casada live in Stewart, where she's been seeing throughout the day some of the damage there and flooding as well.
Michael, what we're seeing is pockets of damage in different parts of Martin County and flooding as well. Right now, we're standing in pretty much ankle-deep water here at Southwest Sunshine Street and Southwest Wildwood Drive. This is just west of the Turnpike, a little north of Canner Highway. And the entire road was impassable today. According to the Martin County website, it was listed as one of the impassable roads due to flooding. You can tell that the water is starting to recede. I can tell you, just walking down here very slowly, there were a lot of things floating by me, a couple logs, branches, and even a crab. Yes, I saw a crab swimming along. I'm not sure if they swim or what they do, but it was going along as well. And it looks like the water is being pulled towards a drain, maybe down that way near the dead end. There's a pretty strong current here. You can see that the wind is also pretty strong. If you take a look up here, Thomas, if you want to pan up to the trees, you could just see that there is a lot of wind gusts that come and go in this area. Now, if we whip around and show you the area, because it is a residential neighborhood, you see that there are many lights on. So here, neighbors didn't lose power, which is a good thing. Still dealing with flooded waters. If you remember earlier today, Michael Shannon, we were in that neighborhood in the Fork River Estates where there were some possible straight line winds or
So every now and then when we have these conditions outside, we come and go in terms of contact with some of our teams in the field. But just to put a fine point on Michelle's piece there, you may be in Stewart, you may be looking outside and the winds aren't too bad. You might want to think, oh, I'll venture out. But that case in point, standing there, if you had not pulled right up on that water, you would not have seen that in the roadway. So really best to stay home and try to, ride this out.
Stay home, be safe, and let work crews get out and do what they need to do. And we'll be back with more coverage in a moment.
Greetings, everyone. I'm just here giving a little update on Hurricane Ian. So they're on a little break right now. So thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to broadcast a little while longer to see what's going on, and then I'll be closing out soon. Thank you, guys. God bless you. Much love and blessings.
You might want to think, oh, I'll venture out. But that case in point, standing there, if you had not pulled right.
Tracking in and keeping a particular eye at this hour in Okeechobee County under hurricane warning as it deals with Ian as it moves on by in this state after a ferocious and historic in all the wrong ways day for Florida, especially Southwest Florida.
We're starting to get reports from various folks, reporters and, friends and family coming out of the Fort Myers area. And, I shudder to think what we're going to see at daybreak. But what we've been covering throughout this day kind of does lay out what we can anticipate only for tomorrow. That seems to be a refrigerator rolling down the street and one of these areas that just, got hit with some of the worst storm surge there in the Fort Myers area.
Again, and you look at cars submerged, you look at all of this, vehicles floating down the street, the refrigerator, the storm surge that some areas 6 feet. The governor's office said at the EOC headquarters in Tallahassee, maybe 10 feet or more, perhaps significantly more in some spots. And we see scenes like this up and down the Southwest Florida coastline. 3 counties where we are told completely in the dark tonight.
We watched this, rolling so very fast out of Naples tonight.
Steve, who's with us now, we talked about this, the Gulf of Mexico just literally being pushed well inland by the ferocious nature of these winds. And Steve, for people joining us, we don't see that kind of thing on the Atlantic side. As you begin again your coverage, and we thank you and your team for all that you've been doing for us, a brief reminder for anybody joining us about why the topography of the Gulf allows for that ferocious surge that we wouldn't see, at least in that kind of way here.
Yeah, historic storm surges. This one, who knows? It'll take likely days, maybe weeks to finalize exactly just how high the storm surge got in this hurricane. There'll be a lot of analysis on it. But in previous storms like Katrina, Camille, storms that have hit the northern Gulf Coast, we're talking 28 to 30 foot storm surge. And the reason that it's so dramatic on the Gulf of Mexico, northern Gulf of Mexico, and not so significant across the Atlantic coast is the topography. The underwater is very shallow in the Gulf of Mexico, and that water has in the Gulf the ability just to pile up along the coastline and the beaches, and it just has nowhere to go. It can't circulate like it can off our coastline. You go a mile or two off the coast and you're in 100, very shortly after in a couple hundred feet of water. So as the water comes in and storm surge comes in along the beaches, it has the ability to sink and circulate and move up the coast and down the coast. On the Gulf of Mexico side, it gets trapped. It gets trapped by these bays through the Fort Myers and Port Charlotte and up around Tampa Bay, because the water just has nowhere to go. It can't escape like it can. It can't circulate like it can on the Atlantic side. Now, we can still get significant storm surges. Worst case scenario would be upwards of 15, maybe 16 feet on the Atlantic side. We certainly saw some of that in Hurricane Andrew, but not as significant as back on the West Coast, especially the northern Gulf of Mexico, where those storm surges are, literally they're incredible. A 30-foot storm surge. Michael, another example, which rolled through a few years ago made landfall as a Cat 5 in Mexico Beach. Tonight, we're watching those winds, and there's the last of that little center of circulation that has, this was the eye. That was that massive eye that we were watching, about 40 miles wide, that worked in around Sanibel and Captiva. Now you can't even make it out on the radar. What you can see, though, are these very strong winds and this extreme wind situation, which is now, that's been dropped, but now we have a flash flood warning from Sebring all the way back toward the coastline, because this is not really budging very much in the last couple of hours, so it's dumping significant rainfall. Look at these wind speeds. So these are wind gusts from some observing stations in the last hour. We're almost up to 80 miles an hour for our wind gusts in Sebring, and that's just outside our viewing area. Okeechobee at 64 miles an hour. These winds are howling, and I've been looking at the Doppler radar. I don't want to skip by Treasure Coast and Palm Beach County. It's a mix of 30s, 40s, and upwards of 51 in Fort Pierce right now at the airport there, but even higher in Okeechobee, and expected that it'll climb even more. Here's the reason why: that just the center of circulation, what's left of it, is closer to Okeechobee County, and as this area pulls more toward Daytona overnight, we'll still be in some of the stronger winds across Okeechobee County. The strongest and the real damaging winds stay to the north. But I've been watching the Doppler radar through the evening, especially in the last couple of hours, and I want to bring up and I'm going to try to here, the radar out of Melbourne and some of the strong gusty winds that we're seeing in that area. It looks like it's not going to work here. Anyway, we're seeing there's a little swath of winds here aloft that are anywhere from about 60 to 70 miles an hour. Getting picked up on Doppler radar, and they're pushing into Okeechobee. So I just gave the heads up to Tori and Michael, who are in that area, that these winds could, in the next hour or two, pick up even stronger, and we could get into strong tropical storm force winds or even hurricane wind gusts starting now and in toward midnight and even into 1 and 2 in the morning. And the forecast models also indicate that some of these winds will start to pop too. Okeechobee upwards of 78 mile an hour wind gusts. That's at midnight. And then you can see along the coastline of the Treasure Coast, 40 to 50. And then we start to drop. At 5 in the morning, we're down into the mid 50s for those winds. And then these are not sustained. These are wind gusts. And then they continue to drop it tomorrow afternoon, a mix of 30s and 40s, and then even less. 30 and 40 mile an hour winds are still a little unsettling, but they won't do a damage like the potential for damage when you start getting gusts around 70 and 80 miles an hour, and especially for an extended period of time. So that's the Okeechobee wind field forecast for Palm Beach County, ranging anywhere from about 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gusts into midnight and 1 in the morning, about the same. And then it'll slowly drop into 5 in the morning, 30 to 40, and even less. Even along the coastline and back around the lake. These are all southwest winds that start to develop, and that's in behind what at this point tomorrow afternoon is a tropical storm, no longer a hurricane. At 11 o'clock, I think we're going to see a much weaker hurricane. There's a look at it. Look at how expansive this is, and that wind field stretches out hundreds and hundreds of miles from the center. So at 9 p.m., it's down to 105 miles an hour. It is continuing that track toward the northeast, slowing down a little bit, 8 miles an hour, but expected to emerge off the coast of Daytona as a tropical storm, and then another landfall expected around Charleston. That'll happen on Friday, and it's a long track the next 4 to 5 days away from Florida. And the watches and warnings are still in place. Hurricane warning for the Okeechobee County, and a tropical storm warning showing up blue. That is for the Treasure Coast and all of Palm Beach County, where the wind gusts, the peak winds are expected to be a little bit less. But that wind field is going to be around overnight and into sunrise tomorrow before it finally starts to pull away after that. And so it's going to be a slow improvement. Thankfully, these numbers have dropped. This is the hurricane wind probabilities, less than, well, in most of the area, less than 5%, and they're 5% for Vero. But these numbers yesterday were around 10 to 15%. And that gets a little, it's still low, but it gets a little concerning when they're at those values. But they've dropped, so that's nice to see, because the storm track is definitely going to the north and not so much to the east anymore. So watching that wind swath on the Doppler radar for the next couple of hours, that's what we're watching really closely, because that has the potential of really picking up those winds. So no, these are winds aloft on the Doppler radar, but it's right along this band of little showers that have popped up, and it's swinging into Okeechobee. So winds aloft are around 65 to 75 miles an hour, and some of those could make it to the surface. And Tori and Michael are watching for those. I want to send it over to Kate.
All right, Steve. Yeah, as you mentioned, I think the biggest threat will be the winds over the next 24 to 36 hours. So, we don't want people to get complacent, even though it's looking better for Palm Beach County. When you're talking about these gusty winds, all it takes is, a palm frond, a large palm frond to blow at you, and it could really injure you. So that's why everyone should just be staying inside tonight, even if you think it's pretty good outside. So as this moves to the north, we will start to see fewer rain bands and less intense rain bands over Palm Beach County, and then we'll continue to see the conditions improve for the Treasure Coast as we head into the next tomorrow afternoon. Things are really going to get better for everybody. So on Vipercast, 11 o'clock tonight, you can see the heavy rain is just to the north of our viewing area, but still tracking some of those gusty rain bands like Steve was talking about. So that's why it's just best not to be out on the roads if you don't have to. And I want to show you this. This is in about 3 hours, give or take from now. Yes, absolutely.
Got another wind report just came out from Okeechobee at the airport there of 73 miles per hour. So that Doppler radar is working, and that is in Okeechobee. We're going to go to Michael Bushner in Okeechobee County. And of course, he is watching that that line of strong winds. I've been talking about it for the last few minutes. It's swinging in toward Okeechobee. Now, 73-mile-an-hour winds. Those are winds that are close, very, very close, within a mile per hour of hurricane force gusts. And those could certainly bring down power lines. And it looks like this swath is going to be around for a little. Let's go to Michael Bushner, who is in Okeechobee County. Michael, we're getting reports of almost hurricane force wind gusts in Okeechobee.
Yeah, I definitely could believe it. Let me swing the camera around. We're going to stand back here and just kind of take cover, but I want Con to show you. Take a look at the, let me see what we're going to show you here. There's some mist coming in here. We'll shine the light for you on these trees. Within the last, 15 minutes or so, things have definitely changed here. I mean, these winds are blowing really hard. You can hear it just howling through the air. There's also a mist that's moving through the area as well, so you can kind of get an idea. There's that light pole you can see kind of showing us right now. You can see that pole is definitely shaking, and you get these bursts, strong bursts of wind, and you can just hear the force that's just blowing through these winds as it moves through these areas. There's debris, mostly seems to be limbs from trees that are just snapping off and blowing through this area, but no doubt we are feeling the strongest winds that we have felt all day and all evening. You can see, if we maybe zoom in on this other light post here, you can see as the wind just kind of whips through here, you can see the rain will just start blowing, and it all kind of subsides quickly, and then all of a sudden we just get another strong burst of wind, and that's been the pattern. But as I said at the last maybe 15-20 minutes ago, things have definitely escalated, and you can definitely notice a big change in the winds that are moving through here. We actually changed moved our vehicle just a little bit in the area where we are parked because we could feel the air moving under the vehicle, and it was pushing our car. And the vehicle is parked, as you could imagine, in basically a covered area here. So that just kind of gives you some perspective. There's a stop sign here that's teetering in the wind here. Let's see if we step out a little bit, Con, if you feel safe, if we move through here. I want to give you guys, if we can, a little perspective just on, you can hear maybe the wind as it kind of picks up. We'll try to stick the microphone out a little bit just so at home you can get a little perspective on what this sounds like. Let me see if we can hear this. So there's a little bit of what it sounds like here at the moment. It's kind of subsiding, but I definitely, you can see debris that's just blowing by here. Looks like tree limbs and whatnot that's coming through here. I can tell you I touched base with the sheriff's office here in Okeechobee a little while ago. They told me down trees and also some traffic lights that are in the area. But of course, the conditions out here, there has to be some more damage through this area. Earlier this evening, we went to visit some people at their homes very close to the levee at Lake Okeechobee, and some people are choosing to stay and not leave. You got to kind of wonder if they're regarding that decision at this hour, as these winds, as I think I heard you guys say, 73-mile-an-hour winds whipping through this area. We are going to stay here, seek shelter here as these winds continue to pick up. And keep in mind, as you hear this coming through my microphone, these are winds that are blowing through this area here that is covered. This is a drive-through here, and the winds are still just making their way right through here. So we're going to get back in the car, get a little safety. We'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
Okay, and now we have, in the last 15 seconds, a 74-mile-an-hour wind. So now we have a hurricane force gust reported at the Okeechobee airport. And so, yeah, if you take cover and just, ride out in the safety of the car instead of being outside. Michael, I brought up the Doppler radar to show you. Now, these are winds aloft in the atmosphere, but a lot of these winds are making it down to the surface in Okeechobee, and you can see numbers here of high 60s, 70, 75 miles an hour. This is a swath of winds and rain, as you saw with Michael in the background there, heavy rain working across Okeechobee County, almost all of Okeechobee County. Now, why does it drop to the north closer? Well, there's a circulation, just a messed up circulation from what was the eye of Hurricane Ian to the north around the Sebring area. And then as you get into this area here, even stronger winds, and this is where we have that extreme wind warning, just to the northwest of Sebring, way outside our area. But those winds are starting to come down a little bit, but not very much and not very fast. That extreme wind warning has been replaced by a flash flood warning. But this impressive winds, and this is all the kind of leftover winds from the hurricane earlier that made landfall on the West Coast.
So, Steve, I'm seeing the wind kind of come up, and I was intrigued seeing the rain. I know that you said there would still be some rain, but that was a good bit of rain coming.
It was a significant rain band that fired out. I was a little surprised by that too, because the Doppler radar is picking up the winds, right, and not so much with the rainfall at the present time. And those winds, and that helps some of these strong gusty winds make it to the surface too. When you get these big downpours, downdrafts, and that all hits the surface, and with now 74-mile-an-hour wind. That's from the southeast, the Okeechobee Airport. It reported just a couple of minutes ago. It's just continuing to climb. A half an hour ago, it was low and mid-60s for the wind gust, now up to mid-70s. These are winds that'll cause some damage, especially to mobile homes, RVs, power lines. We're getting up into our criteria for wind speeds that will cause structural damage, not significant damage, but some structural damage.
And Steve, talk for those just coming into our coverage, and especially for our friends in Okeechobee County, take us through the next half hour, couple of hours of what you're seeing and what they should be expecting as we move deeper into the night.
Yeah, I suspect these winds are going to climb a little bit more. The computer models are indicating that we could get up into the high 70s for wind gusts into midnight and shortly after. So we're at 74 right now. Not unexpected. There's a hurricane warning, and there has been for the last day or two for Okeechobee County. So this is not a surprise. It's just that we're now starting to see these strong winds verified on not only Doppler radar, but at the Okeechobee Airport, which just had 74 miles an hour. It's nice to see the Doppler because we're just kind of pinpointing the wind field aloft in the atmosphere, but to see these numbers verify at the airport is pretty impressive. I mean, a lot of these winds, because it's a hurricane, so a lot of the winds aloft at say 1,000 feet are making it down to the surface and causing some issues along and some damage. As Michael said, I think he mentioned power lines down, and some flashes from transformers too.
The winds that are coming up from the airport there that you keep pointing to, Steve, and then the orange area behind you, will those two come together at some point?
No. This is all going to stay back to the way. This is all that messed up circulation from what was the eye of the hurricane, and it's working towards Sebring, so that's why we have the lighter winds in this area, and then that's why it's dramatically stronger. This area here past Sebring, Avon Park, this was the northern eye wall of the hurricane. Okay. I mean, I don't know if the Hurricane Center is still defining an eye. There's not much of an eye here, but there's certainly somewhat of a broad circulation in this area here, and so the winds are lighter near the center, and they're much stronger on the east and to the south, and the strongest winds are even stronger on the northwestern side. Let me just go back a couple of frames here, and I could show you the radar loop. Well, there it is right there over Sebring and back toward the west around Arcadia. There it is right there. There's a really well-defined, and what was a well-defined eye is just like completely collapsing on itself, and there's still somewhat of a spin, but it's just not as well defined as it was earlier, because it's over land and has been since 3 p.m. Or do we have 10 now, almost 10 p.m. So 7 hours now it's been over land. I mean, it's pretty impressive that it still looks like this. A lot of hurricanes that make landfall and they're 7 hours over land don't even have this structure to them. But this is because it was a strong Category 4 hurricane, that it's able to keep at least some structure, and will likely still be a hurricane with the 11 p.m. advisory.
Steve, last night it seemed like every 5 seconds, it wasn't that, but it was all night long. We possible or confirmed in some cases tornado activity. As you look at the weather tonight, straight line winds are enough to deal with. Anything that suggests to you that it in any way, shape, or form mirrors that or sets up that way, or is this something altogether different in terms of what your meteorological expectation would be?
Yeah, there are a couple of key factors going on here. Now, the center of the storm is at the same latitude as Okeechobee, or what is left of that center, which takes away a lot of the wind shear that you need to get tornadoes to develop. There's still a tornado watch in effect for the Treasure Coast, and as the storm pulls a little farther away, so more like Stewart and Port St. Lucie up along the coastline, yeah, there's still a risk for some of these bands to come in. And even with sometimes what happens here is the strong winds in the bands, even though there's not a lot of rotation, there's intense winds with them, And what the Weather Service will do is issue a tornado warning because there are strong damaging winds in a feeder band that are making it down to the surface, and they want to alert everyone. And that is the best way to do it, through a tornado warning. That has happened in the past too. It's not necessarily a funnel cloud that comes down from the sky and hits the ground and does the damage. It's just damaging straight line winds that can do the same thing. So that's an issue that we're going to be watching. And there is a swath, and obviously that heavy rain that's developing over to Okeechobee and over the downtown area, like we saw with Michael and Tori. I believe Tori, we can check in with her and see what's going on, because she's in Okeechobee too, experiencing some of this. But 74-mile-an-hour wind gusts are impressive, to say the least.
Steve, you can go to her right now and chat with her.
All
She's
right,
ready. She's
let's
standing
bring her in. And Tori, likely dramatically stronger winds than we saw even an hour ago.
Yeah, definitely dramatically stronger winds is a good way to put it. And we're also starting to see some rain. We really...
Well, that's going to happen. And, obviously we're going to watch that and check back with her, because that is one of the challenges of live TV in a hurricane.
Exactly so. And our crews out there marshaling their resources, staying safe, making sure they've got shelter nearby, trying to report on all of this. Steve, pick up on your thoughts, though. You said something that kind of caught us too. It's a reminder over on the Treasure Coast, as we look at St. Lucie, Martin, Indian River counties. You talked about that. It's a reminder why everybody needs to stay home, sit tight, and I guess a different kind of snuggle alert tonight. Just to stay at home and be safe, because we need to let this all get by.
And when you start to see 74-mile-an-hour wind gusts, it suddenly it clicks in. Hey, there's a tornado warning in Okeechobee County, and it's a serious weather situation. Now it will start to improve. I think it's going to be 2 or 3, maybe 4 hours before that happens. It has to actually lift north. But that tornado watch is still in effect too for the Treasure Coast and Okeechobee County. That is until 5 a.m. So we're watching it all, Shannon and Michael, and keeping you up to date if we see some stronger winds develop too.
Steve, thanks so much as always. Our coverage continues right after the break.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm just here giving you guys a little update on the storm. So they're on a commercial break, so just stay tuned. I'll be on for about 30 more minutes, and then I'll close out. God bless you all. Stay safe, my fellow Floridians.
Is. So my suggestion to folks who live on the water around Tampa Bay itself, probably around the bay more than anything, I would set my alarm for about 3 or 3:30. High tide varies on the exact spot, but it's between about 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. because I remember getting messages like it was yesterday with Ada, and people were frantic because they didn't expect the water to rise the way that it did. And as Jason said, if that tide is at 2.7 feet, you're already 1.5 feet higher than you should be on any normal day anyway. So you're already at 1.5 feet. If you get a surge of a couple of feet, you're now up to 4 feet, 4.5 feet, and that puts you up toward Ada. And there were plenty of spots in Johns Pass that had water. But that is my reason. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in the same places. It probably won't be. It all depends on the angle. And as I said, I'm the first to admit, It is, to me, the toughest thing to predict with the tropical system. As a matter of fact, in the Hurricane Center's page, they have a storm surge thing. It says experimental because we're still trying to get it down. So better safe than sorry. I would set an alarm if you live on the water, on the bay, or even offshore, although my gut is I don't think we're going to see it as much there. I think we would probably see it more there, but still, set your alarm just to make sure and take a glance at that water isn't coming up, or for that matter, watch us, whether it's on the streaming app, and if you don't have power, if you do have power, you can watch us on TV, but I just think it's something you should do because I just can't get out of my mind how frantic people were when they were reaching. And by the way, that was a 4 or 4.5 foot surge. And that kind of puts into perspective what happened today in Naples and in Fort Myers that had a 16-foot surge with 20-foot waves on top of it. So that is the bullet that we dodged here in the Bay Area when we were looking at a forecast of 6 to 10-foot surge. And that was when it was a Cat 3. It just became borderline Cat 5 last night and today. So the number that was in Naples would have been our number 2 because a stronger hurricane will produce more of a surge. So our thoughts and prayers go out to the folks down south. But at the end of the day, for the Bay Area, we clearly dodged another one because it could have been every bit as bad for our area. Still, though, we're tracking the rain and the storms. Well, not so much the storms, but the rain and the wind through the overnight. But the worst certainly over, and I would expect improvements as we go on through the next several hours. Guys?
And Dennis, I just want to reiterate, you talked about Ada, and I have to admit again that I lost my car in Ada, and it was because it was an area of Bayshore that does not flood. I mean, one part of Bayshore near Rome and those folks who live in that area near Howard, it always floods. But the other direction near MacDill Air Force Base, Gandy, Bay to Bay, that area further towards the bay south, that doesn't flood. And when I lost my car, again, high tide, 2 a.m, the storm hadn't stopped. And by the way, the officers who didn't know how bad it was thought that the street was clear. And me, along with several others, I think with at least a dozen cars, flooded in that storm. And because we simply didn't know. And like you talked about, Dennis, you can't see when it's dark. You can't see how bad the flooding is. And so I continued to drive. And by the time I realized the flooding was so bad, my car shut off and I was stuck. And then I had to be rescued through the window 2 hours later. Thank goodness for the Tampa Police Department, who had rescue folks out there, first responders, to help those of us who didn't know. But you talk about surge, and you're right. There was no way to know. And it was one of the scariest things I've ever been through. But it's another reason, like you said, Dennis, to stay off the roads, especially in the dark, because you just don't know what's out there.
Well, when the power's out, that makes it even more difficult, right? Because, I mean, you normally have street lights to at least give you an idea. I mean, if you're driving in relatively dark conditions and you know the area like the back of your hand, so, you don't really think much about it. And that possibility does exist, again, between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And then the tide thereafter, 12 hours later, there's even a chance, if the reach is broad enough, there could be a bit of surge for the following tide. But I really think if we're going to get surge, and we knew today, this afternoon, in spite of what a lot of folks had been saying, we knew this was not going to be a surge event because the winds were drying out the bay. I mean, it happened again. It happened with Irma, and it happened today. So today was never an issue. But tomorrow, now I will tell you, if that high tide was 6 hours later, I would be really concerned because by then the winds absolutely would be more of a southwest or westerly direction. 4 a.m., they're going to be around northwest, so it's a close call. So hopefully it won't be quite enough of a turnaround where it can go in, but it's at least worth setting your alarm if you live there and checking it out. And as Wendy mentioned, driving around, make sure you're extra careful. I kind of doubt there's going to be a lot of people driving around at 4 a.m. tomorrow, but you never know.
Yeah, and Dennis, as I'm looking at that radar there behind you, it's kind of like you see it moving, across Polk County into Orlando, and you think, okay, we're getting a little bit better here, but so many folks are hearing so much stuff there. But we're looking at video
this is
right
Winter
now.
Haven,
yeah,
right?
Winter Haven.
Yeah, it is. And that's just the area, as we were looking at that video, they're seeing the same kind of wind at about 60. It looks like, is that a transformer that blew?
Yeah.
It looks like it is.
Yeah,
Unless
it
that's a
looks like
power
it.
line going down with it too, because you're seeing a lot.
Yeah,
of
there's the
flashes
arcing.
with it. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, when you get 60 to 65 mile an hour wind gusts, and you get torrential downpours, this kind of stuff can happen. And this will continue to happen overnight, especially in those inland spots, especially in eastern Hillsborough County, especially in Hardy, DeSoto, and in Polk County and northern Highlands County. But at least in looking at this right now, there is not an extreme wind advisory or an extreme wind warning. So that's important. That's a big step for us, because we have seen that was issued, the first one, just before landfall at about 1 o'clock. And ever since then, we have had one in effect the entire time. So the fact that we are no longer looking, and by the way, well, no, I guess, Jason, do we still have the flash flood warning, or did that expire? Because it looked like it wasn't showing up on my map as well. But regardless, we're headed in the right direction. We're getting there, down to 100 now. We lost another 5 miles an hour. So with another 5 miles an hour after this, we'll be down to a Category 1 hurricane. So it is clearly collapsing quickly. The rain is still heavy. The winds are gusty, but the threat of any significant weather, significant wind, damaging wind is pretty much winding down. Still could see some trees down, but you are not going to get structural damage with this. And honestly, the only areas that will get structural damage is what was going on down south, unless, of course, the tree comes down and falls on your home. But typically, strong Cat 3s, 4s, and 5s are when the foundation of a home actually can be damaged. And that happened today, but not in our area. That was mostly Charlotte and even Lee County, from Naples up to Fort Myers. Guys?
All right, thanks, Dennis. We now want to go to Adam Walser, is just north of Sarasota County, where, of course, the storm has been moving through right now, continuing to get those outer bands we've seen.
He's been in Bradenton for us today, where you've seen a lot of wind. You saw a lot of rain earlier today. Things starting to wind down there, but still, whistling there behind you, Adam.
It sure is. These boats are still rocking up and down, not quite as much as they were a few hours ago. We went onto the county's website, and it said that in Manatee County that it was a steady 40-mile-an-hour wind with gusts up to 60 miles an hour. That's at the airport. Of course, we're right here on the water, so we're getting occasionally some of those higher gusts. Right now, about 165,000 customers out of power here. So this is one of the few places in Manatee County where there is any power. That's because it's close to the critical infrastructure, including Manatee Memorial Hospital and the police department and City Hall and some of those facilities that are right here in downtown Bradenton. But more of Manatee County and those more rural areas, they're completely out of power right now. And because of this heavy rainfall and the heavy winds throughout the night, those power crews haven't been able to get out there and restore any of the power. And in fact, all the emergency crews have been kept in their stations. They're not responding to any emergencies because of this high level of wind and the rain. We haven't seen a lot of water piling up on the roads here in Bradenton. We haven't been out and about because of the conditions, so we don't know exactly what some of those rural areas look like. Occasionally, we will see a car or two. We've seen 2 or 3 cars here in the last hour. People are starting to venture out more than they were at the height of the storm 3 or 4 hours ago, but it's still a long way to go before things are completely cleared out here in Bradenton. Back to you guys.
All right, Adam, thank you. And as things are starting to wind down just a little bit there in Bradenton, we want to move our coverage now to Lakeland. We know the storm is heading that way. Rebecca Petit joins us live from there. Rebecca, we know the storm is heading through Polk County. How are the conditions there behind you?
The wind is howling and the rain has been relentless. And as it has gotten dark, you can just see how hard the rain is falling. I'm here off of US 98 North. There are no traffic lights working right now. There have been reports of down power lines, down trees, and thousands of people without power right now. And US Highway 98 is usually a highly trafficked area. No one's out on the streets. Everyone is hunkered down, sheltered in place, waiting for the storm to pass. I'm told that disaster relief crews have already arrived from up north to help out with cleanup once the storm passes. For now, I'm live in Lakeland. Rebecca Petit, ABC Action News.
Thank you. We want to go to our Paul LaGrone. He's been riding out the storm in Polk County, also in Lakeland, and he's seen quite a bit of intense rain and wind over the last several hours.
Yeah, and Paul, the good news is, as Dennis was just saying, this storm is starting to kind of die in strength here, but unfortunately it's still pretty high up there, and unfortunately it's heading in your direction. How are things looking there?
Yeah, I mean, we're expecting the next 2 hours, even 3 hours, to be kind of the strongest part for us guys. I mean, right now we're seeing just the consistency, really, when it comes down to it, of the volume of rain, the intensity of the rain, and then now the intensity of the wind itself, right around that 70, 74 mile an hour tops for the gusts, but sort of at a more consistent rate. And the streets here in downtown Lakeland, this is overlooking Massachusetts Avenue here, right at the corner of Main Street, and it's almost funneling the wind and the rain and the water off the street and sort of in a tunnel-like fashion blowing it all around. And so you're seeing it come from a lot of different directions. That's Lake Mirror in the background there, and it's dark because a transformer blew up a few hours ago, so he saw the power go out. And there's another gust of wind coming through as I'm speaking here, and it's sort of being funneled through the downtown streets. It's sort of dispersed and distributed throughout this sort of heart of the city here in Lakeland. The good news is the power structure seems to be maintaining. You see the lights, the street lights are still on, the traffic lights are still working for thankfully no one to use them. Finally, we saw a lot of people driving around. We don't see that now. The only people that are driving are police officers patrolling the streets, making sure people are safe. You see the winds. I mean, it's really packing a punch right now here in Lakeland. And in the greater parts of Polk County beyond the city of Lakeland, we're talking Polk City, Four Corners, south of Lake Hancock, Peace River Basin. Those are the real trouble spots because of the flooding and in the low-lying areas, and depending on what kind of structures people are riding this storm out in. I can tell you where we are here in the hotel. People came from all over Tampa Bay to ride it out. What is a Cat 1, essentially going to be a Cat 1 hurricane by the time the heart of it reaches here, it looks like, as it's dropping in pressure. So the story, and the headline is, as Dennis had said, at least for Tampa Bay, that we sort of dodged another one. All things relative, right? It could have been worse. And the story that a lot of people had to make these last-minute switcheroo plans to come from Clearwater, St. Pete, perhaps Sarasota, inland here to Lakeland, and then they end up riding out maybe in some ways more of a severe weather situation than what they might have had before, when 48 hours ago Ian was presenting itself in a different way than it is now. As this thing is now going to move north into Orlando, my wife is actually on air and covering all the Florida stations in Orlando, and it'll get bad there at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I think another transformer blew, guys. As we were just speaking, I heard a rumble, and there seems to be some lights went out, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll have to monitor that. Yeah, it looks like we got something happened. So the power outages are going to be the problem. And in Polk County, they've been dealing with power outages since this afternoon, and it steadily grew from there. And obviously that makes all the difference in the world when you're trying to ride out a storm, no matter what the category is. So, it's the consistency of the wind and the power of the rain is picking up. But, and not to compare, because everyone's situation is different, but, all thoughts, of course, with those folks in Southwest Florida who really found themselves, I would imagine, unfortunately, some folks fighting for their lives, really, to survive this storm. So we think about them, but we think about everyone who's in a vulnerable situation tonight, and just ride it out here in Lakeland and Polk County. 3, 4, 5 hours, we're on the better side of this thing. So stay strong. Guys, back to you.
Yeah, very true, Paul. And you mentioned about that transformer we just saw live on the air in Winter Haven. We saw another transformer go out. And then earlier today, we saw Naples had a huge transformer that literally caught on fire. It was quite an explosion. And I know Michael Palusko, who's been in Venice, has heard several explosions similarly, because there have been, and as we know, so many power outages across the state, 1.9 million folks without power as we speak. And, unfortunately, they just can't restore that power until it's safe. And until those mile per hour winds get below 45 miles an hour, which probably is not going to happen until tomorrow or even later tomorrow afternoon, it's just not safe for anyone to be out there.
Yeah, it would be great if everybody wakes up tomorrow and their power is back on right away. Some people unbelievably have kept their power through this thing, who have gotten a good portion of this storm. But, at this point, we're over 2 million people in the state of Florida without power right now. Close to half of them right now are in our viewing area.
Absolutely.
So we know what you guys are going through there. We lost power here at the station
We did.
earlier tonight, and then all sorts of things started kind of going haywire.
Our internet went down,
Yeah.
our power went down, and then flickers in and out a couple times over the last several hours since we've been covering this storm. And it can be a little jarring too, because you don't know if they're going to come back on. I mean, we lost internet, we lost everything. So, so if you are just listening to us, whether it be on the app or on a radio station, you are certainly not alone. We will be here through this storm. We're not going anywhere. So if you're sitting in the dark right now and all you have is your phone or your computer, or, or all you have is the radio, trust me that we will be holding your hand through this, and our whole team is not going anywhere. We will be here guiding you through this storm until it's out of our state, which hopefully will be sometime, as Dennis says, Thursday afternoon.
By the way, great job by our engineers getting us back on the air here, so
fantastic.
We can still talk to you. So Dennis and Jason and Shay and Greg can all continue to give you the forecast here, because for a second there we were a little bit nervous, but they did a great job. And here we are still talking to you folks tonight as you're getting through the storm.
Absolutely. Next, we want to go to our Rochelle Aline. She's live for us in Dunedin in Pinellas County. And I just want to say Dunedin is one of the most favorite spots for so many folks who come into town. It's such a quaint town, and so many tourists love it. It's a beautiful area. So I'm curious as to how things look now for you, Rochelle. How's the storm? How's the wind? How's the rain?
Yeah, we actually ended up having to move on, you guys. So we're in Tarpon Springs right now, and you see me holding on to my hood because the rain has been, touch and go, but the wind down here, we've been seeing wind gusts that have blown my hood off. We've had to kind of refocus ourselves because they've almost knocked us down. They're coming in these bands, and they're pretty strong at times. We're in Tarpon Springs again, and we're near the intersection of Spring Boulevard and MLK, near the Whitcomb Bayou. This is an area that historically floods even in regular thunderstorms, and surprisingly right now, it's pretty clear out here. That said, homeowners out here, they're not taking any chances. You can see there's a house across the street. It's a little bit dark, but this homeowner here, he says his house floods all the time. He's actually made kind of like a sand barrier with some tarp and sands and sandbags and some bricks to try to keep water from the front of his home. He tells me he's inside, he's hunkering down, and really people out here are waiting to see what the rain throughout the night and the tide in the morning will bring them. And they said, again, they're not taking any chances when it comes to flooding because it floods here so often. For now, in Tarpon Springs, Rochelle Aline, ABC Action News.
All right, Rochelle, thank you. And we want to go to South Tampa now to our reporter, Kylie McGivern. She's been there for us, not too far off of Bayshore all day long, but you moved into safety just a little while ago. Just things were a little bit dicey there for a while.
Yeah, and Kylie, as we know, South Tampa often floods, even during a normal summertime downpour. And that whole area off of Bayshore and beyond has been under a mandatory evacuation because it is flood zone A, since you are right off the water. What are conditions like now?
It has gotten a lot more windy out, and I guess I'm just drawn to areas near the water. You just heard from Rochelle. I grew up in Tarpon Springs. My parents had to evacuate along the water. Now we're in South Tampa, both areas that even on just a typical day, typical rainstorm, you said it yourself, it floods. Now what we're seeing more of is just the wind. Earlier, when our photojournalist Matt McGlashan and I tried to get out of the car, get our gear in, thinking we can't be out on the roads anymore, especially with it now being dark, you cannot see the dangers ahead. We had to really push to even get out of our car. And this is in an area that's not even in the thick of it, like some of our colleagues are seeing in other parts of our community in the state. So as we were out and about, there were some areas that this wind, even earlier today, brought down some serious trees. So take a look from earlier today. This is a bit further north from where we are. This was a massive tree that came down in the 300 block of West Francis Avenue. This is not far from downtown Tampa Heights area, to put that in perspective. And this, you can just see the power that this has between the rain and then seeing that the danger not only in that the tree came down, but it brought power lines down with it that you cannot always see easily. So these dangers we're talking about, all of that is just amplified when it's at night, and you may not realize it until you're basically right on top of it, already in a dangerous situation. We spoke with a neighbor right near there who said seeing that, they heard the tree crash and it made them think of their own tree in their backyard and the dangers.
That tree's big. We have about a 4-story tree in the backyard here that is over our roof and a garage in the house. And, as much as I love the trees, it's a danger.
And we want to bring you to a live look right now at Tampa Bay Boulevard, a bit further north. Just again, to give you an idea, if you're curious what some of the roads look like, this is what it looks like out there right now. And Tampa police, other law enforcement, first responders encouraging you not to let your curiosity, quite frankly, get the best of you and drive around in an area that could quickly become a danger, not realizing. I think earlier we showed some video of one of these street lights coming crashing down with the wind. You just don't know. Even when we were out, some of the tree branches kind of flying by, you think you're fine 1 minute, in a gust, it can create a whole different story. So we will continue to check in with you, but for now, we are live in South Tampa. Kylie McGivern, ABC Action News.
Some good advice. Thank you, Kylie. Our Eric Waxler joins us live now in Hudson Beach. That's in Pasco County. And they've also seen some severe weather, some pretty heavy gusts of wind and rain. Eric, I'm curious as to the conditions now at almost 10:20 at night, what it's like out there.
Yeah, I think we're in one of those patches where it's sort of relaxing a little bit, but every few minutes the wind picks up, the rain picks up, and I think that's going to be the pattern here for the next few hours here in Pasco County, where people are feeling very fortunate that Hurricane Ian took a more southern course and avoided any kind of direct hit that would have really impacted Pasco County, an area where there's been so many flooding issues over the last decade from various storms, the rivers overflowing, whether it's the Anclote or the Cody River. So many neighborhoods that I've been in where, I mean, we're talking about needing boats to go rescue people from their homes, elderly people trapped, and that has happened multiple times in the decade plus that I've been here covering Pasco County. So I know people did not want to deal with that this time around, but they were very prepared to do just that because of the path that it looked like Hurricane Ian was taking. People boarded up their homes. People put up the hurricane shutters. They got the sandbags. They evacuated many of the low-lying areas, especially west of US 19, where we are here in Hudson Beach. So a lot of people have taken heed, but it looks like, thankfully for the people here, the conditions will not be that bad. But that remains to be seen. People are not taking anything for granted. A lot of people have been coming around here to Hudson Beach all night, especially before the sun went down, just to kind of get a look at the awe and the amazing sights, looking out at the Gulf and to see the storm coming in. And the Pasco Sheriff's Office has also been here telling them to go home, that this is not a place to come take a look right now, that they need to be home safe for the night. Now, earlier I told you about the Andre Vasilevsky jersey that someone hung on their door because who needs lumber? Vazzy can save everything, right? So we found out who this guy is. His name is Philip Marks, and I think we have some video to show you the jersey. So yeah, he took his Vasilevsky jersey that he wore proudly to the Lightning games, and he hung it on his door. And he felt like that was going to protect him. That was going to save his house from any storm, any hurricane. And hopefully, at last check, his house is standing tall, and he's a big Lightning fan. So we give credit to Philip Marks for coming up with a very creative idea, a lighthearted moment in what's been a difficult day for so many people. Back to you.
Yeah, it really has.
I think we all need a little extra prayer. And if that's what helps him, I say, why not, right?
Right. We want to head to Sarasota now.
Yeah, ABC Action News reporter Mary O'Connell has been tracking the storm out there live for us near a shelter with the latest conditions. Mary, I'm also curious, is everybody still hunkering down in that shelter? Or have they come out to see the damage or anything else? Have you been able to keep them inside the shelter?
I think we're a little split at this point. There are folks who are definitely staying. They've got their blankets out. They've got their pillows. They're on their air mattresses. They are sleeping at this point and at this hour. But we've also had, families still kind of ready to leave and see what's out there. I will tell you, we're taking a look out here, and it seems like maybe the rain has died down a little bit. Maybe, as the storm passes, it comes and goes. But it's still pretty windy. I know that Dennis was talking about earlier, there was a gust in Sarasota up
upwards of 80 plus miles an hour. Of course, that's just one place in Sarasota, but these winds are still really gusty out here. I can step out for a second and see it. Of course, it's dark and you might not be able to see the rain, but man, is it windy. And I don't know if you can hear that, but it is really windy. I mean, you can really hear it howling and blowing right now. We did get an update from emergency services here in Sarasota County not too long ago, about 25 minutes ago, and they said they're actively monitoring weather conditions and reminded people that once winds have decreased under 45 miles an hour, the county's tactical first-in teams will begin clearing emergency routes, and then authorized county staff will start doing damage assessments. They also said they'll be evaluating things like the county's infrastructure and water and wastewater systems. They're really asking people to be patient with this process because they have no idea how long that will take. Until there's daylight, it's hard to tell just how much damage has been done countywide and in specific areas. I know we've had people asking us, what does it look like here? What does it look like here? But until that power, goes back on, because Sarasota County has been dealing with power outages, mass power outages, tens of thousands of people. And we've had a lot of people asking, well, can I go home? Can I go home? Everybody here is saying, no, stay put, shelter in place. You don't know if you have power down. I know we saw a video in Ybor City in Tampa of a stoplight going down in the middle of the street. You don't know what you're going to deal with. It's so dark outside. It's still really windy. And if those rains pick up, you don't want to be caught on the roads with that. So for now, it is still mighty gusty here in Sarasota. We've been here, I think, hour 8. We'll send it back to you. We're going to continue to monitor it here in Sarasota.
Yeah, Mary, thank you. And you talked about the power outages. I know you were just pulling it up. I mean, we have heard that it's been over 2 million in the state of Florida, but in Sarasota County alone, what's the latest number?
255,000.
Yeah.
Just to the north, Manatee County is 135. That's according to Florida Power and Light. So, I mean, almost 400,000 just between those two counties alone, which we kind of expected here. Those were going to be the two counties here in our viewing area that were probably going to get hit the hardest right off the bat as soon as Ian came ashore further south down there by North Fort Myers. We knew Sarasota County was in for it, and we know they're going to wake up tomorrow and, as Mary said, doing some damage assessment, and that area is going to see it really well. I mean, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be destructive, but you're going to see a lot of property damage down there for sure.
And the power outages, I just want to mention, are continuing because I keep getting emails from folks in Hillsborough County. They're still without power. And Pinellas, we got a number of almost 150,000 earlier, and I'm sure it's possible that number is higher as well. So if you are listening to us on our app or on the radio, you are not alone. As we mentioned, about 2 million folks in the state of Florida still without power. And truly, the linemen just can't get out there to fix it and bring back the power to you because it's simply too dangerous. This is Daytona Beach. You can see that wind, how it's picked up. It's very strong at this point. And the rain, as we always talk about, literally coming down sideways and just simply too dangerous for those linemen to get up and try to get that power back on, or for that matter, first responders to rescue anyone in the rising waters and the floods or the surges that we've seen all across the state. So it's very, very important that you stay in your home, even if you don't have power. It is truly the safest place right now for you to be. Hunker down until at least the morning sunlight, where we can see what the streets look like, and you can go out and make sure that you're not stepping on a live power line. And of course, as we talked about the streets, we've had so many trees completely destroyed and over lanais and in the middle of the streets because, as Dennis has mentioned, the water has come down so much. We've had so much rain and the ground is so saturated that it doesn't take a whole lot of wind, Dennis, right, for a tree to knock over when you already have the ground, which is just so saturated.
Yeah, Wendy, I mean, actually, let's get my mic, if we can get my mic real quick. There we go. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just this storm either. I mean, think about the last 6 weeks. We've had an unusual amount of rain, even more so than normal for the rainy season. And then all of a sudden you throw in incredible rainfall totals, record-breaking rainfall totals, 16 to 20 inches of rain in this band right there from Sarasota County in through Hardy County and over towards southern Polk County. And there's just no place for it to go. And again, remember, at this point in time, you had what's known as an onshore flow. In other words, the wind was coming in from the Gulf, right? and pushing the water in. That's why the surge happened. That's why that devastating storm surge occurred, because when the eye of the storm went in, just to the right front quadrant of that, all that water got pushed in. And by the way, we're figuring that was about a 16-foot storm surge. And then you throw on top of that 10 to 20-foot waves. Just devastation. I mean, really, the stuff that I think we've never seen in Florida, at least on the west coast of Florida before. Maybe up in the Panhandle there have been times before with Opal back in '95 and then Michael a few years ago, but not on this side of the state. So what I was saying is, as that onshore flow is coming in, the rain falls. And we're not talking even an inch or two of rain. We're talking 16 inches of rain in about 6 hours. So the rain falls, and if things are going well, it drains out into the Gulf of Mexico. But when the winds are pushing it in, pushing the water in, there's no place for that rain to go except for up and flooding. And so we had some incredible rainfall totals. I have not had any reports of damage yet at this point in the area in red. And by the way, this is set to expire in about 15 minutes. So we'll see if that actually happens, or if the weather service, the local weather service, decides to let that expire. But outside of that, we're still looking at some solid wind, gusts of about 50 to 65 miles an hour across Polk County and in through Highlands County. But the red box from all of Hardee, the northern half of DeSoto and Charlotte, as well as Sarasota, the eastern third of that, that's where that flash flood warning. And again, when you see a word, the threat level, and the Weather Service released the word catastrophic, you see that word, that's the same word that was released for catastrophic storm surge. Now, what happened down south in Naples, in Fort Myers, that was catastrophic. And when you see the videos tomorrow morning, when we actually can really fully grasp what happened, that is an accurate word. We'll see if the flooding was catastrophic in this area. My guess is nowhere close to what happened, because this wasn't a storm surge event. This was merely rainfall. I mean, I'm looking at some pictures and we're seeing boats going in, being pushed in to the shore, several boats just attached to each other because the surge was so strong this afternoon. But right now, still have flooding out there, but the extreme wind warning has expired and was not renewed. So that's great news, and I don't think it will be. I mean, the winds will continue to weaken, but the flash flood warning set to expire at 10:45, again for Charlotte, DeSoto, Hardee, Highlands, Manatee, and Sarasota counties. Heaviest rain right now in the eastern half of Polk County, the northwestern half of Highlands County, most of Hardee, most of DeSoto, and everything continues to blow counterclockwise. So you look at this and you think in the summer mindset, you're like, oh, okay, well, it's going to make it all the way back to the beach. No, no, no. This is different because there's spin. So this is going to come back and then spin right down here. So it's not going to make it all the way back to Pinellas County. There is definitely some winds out there, and decent winds at that. But compared to what we've had earlier, nothing. Winds of 100 miles an hour. The new track comes out in about 15 minutes. It's not going to be any different. At this point, the track doesn't matter. It is moving east. The only question we have is how quickly this will, I'm guessing it'll be a Cat 1 hurricane at 11 o'clock, and hopefully it'll be a tropical storm by tomorrow. That's the last the Hurricane Center was predicting, Cat 1 by 2 a.m. and tropical storm by 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. But even still, the winds are forecast to be pretty gusty across our area most of tomorrow. The rain chances drop down significantly. The wind, not damaging wind, but still kind of gusty throughout the day, maybe 40, 45 mile an hour wind gusts, which is still tropical storm force. New advisories, we'll see if any of these advisories are dropped at the 11 o'clock hour. I kind of think they won't be, but I do think by 5 a.m. tomorrow morning, that's when we will start to see those warnings dropped. Here's a look at current wind gusts. Right now, 40 mile an hour winds in Clearwater. That's 64 in Newport Richey. Has been a while, as is Spring Hill. So I'm not so sure those are current. 61 in St. Pete, that's current. Bradenton, 78. That was last hour. Sarasota at 59. 60 in Avon Park. Lake Placid, 73. Plant City, 47. So Haines City, 60. So again, the wind gusts in the purple area right there have been on average about 60 to 65 miles an hour. Not the kind that does a lot of damage. I mean, we're talking, Maybe a fence might go down. Maybe a small tree or some branches will go down. Maybe a pool cage, some screens, but that's really about it. And as we go through the rest of the overnight hours, the winds are going to be about the same, from around 50 to 65 miles an hour. Well, think about it. Our afternoon thunderstorms, when you get a severe thunderstorm warning, those winds are 60 miles an hour. Now, granted, they last 10, 15 minutes in the summer. They don't last 10 to 15 hours like they have been late over the last 12 hours or so. But my point is, you're not normally going to see a lot of damage. Every now and again, you could see a tree down because, as Wendy mentioned, the ground is just so wet after the last several days of rain, and especially the last 12 hours. Power outages through 1 a.m., still some decent widespread coverage across the state. Last check, about 2 million people without power. But the weather is going to start to cooperate later tonight and into tomorrow morning as the winds start to subside. Speaking of winds, let's check out Jason over in the Weather Center. He'll have some pretty incredible wind gust numbers. Jason?
Yeah, so as we're seeing the storm beginning to move out, if we could pull my mic up, there we go. As we're seeing the storm moving out, we're still getting winds up to near 90 miles per hour in Sarasota. Now, these are the most recent wind gusts. We've obviously been posting those peak wind gusts, and we've been posting them to social media as well. These are the ones within the last 2 hours. So we're still seeing hurricane force gusts here along the coast at Sarasota with that 87 mile per hour gust. Tampa, St. Pete, both at 66 miles per hour. And we're hearing some noises on our roof over here in the Weather Center. So I think that's still the wind persisting at that 60 plus mile per hour gust parameter. 75 in Fort Meade. Of course, we've had the center very close to Fort Meade, as this hurricane, of course, is still a hurricane. We'll see if it's a Category 1 coming up in the next advisory. And
Greetings, everyone. Again, thank you all for tuning in. I just came on for a couple hours to give an update. I will be on later on when I wake up, maybe in the middle of the night, maybe in the morning, to give you guys another update, possibly the aftermath of the storm. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for those that dropped in, those that's passing by, those that will be watching thereafter. Greet you all in the mighty name of Jesus. So have a blessed, safe, wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, whatever part of the world that you are from. God bless you. Much love and blessings every time. It's your girl, Sister Izzy on the beat, man. God bless you.
You're locked in listening to Sister Izzy on the Beat, man. Join me each and every Tuesday, 1 o'clock p.m. Caribbean time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 7 o'clock UK and Nigeria, via YouTube and Facebook at Sis Izzy Thomas. See you there.